Imagine for a moment a big night out turning to tragedy, with a loss of life so great that it becomes the worst fire tragedy in the history of the state.
We ran towards the door. Just as we approached the door, then the lights went out. The whole thing all happened so quick. The flames all started coming towards us.
That's what happened on the 14th of February 1981. 48 young disco-goers died at the Stardust nightclub in Artane, in the north of Dublin.
Around 20 to 2 in the morning, flames were spotted coming from a closed-off area.
Over 750 people were in the Stardust for a Valentine's night special, mainly locals from Artane and Coolock. Along with the dead, 214 were injured, over 100 of them seriously.
The smoke was it's like hot, cold dust. You could see it in front of you. You know, you put your hand, it was very, very hard to see. And of course, naturally enough, I kept screaming.
Almost 40 years later, the case is still on the national news agenda. In recent weeks, the Attorney General ordered new inquests be held for the victims.
So what happened that night? And why are the families and friends of the victims still looking for answers? The effect of the fire in the Stardust was devastating. Whole neighbourhoods were plunged into trauma.
Poor Damien is only 8. I think he was 3.5 when it happened, or 3.
And when he asked me when they were gone, I said, we're working for Holy God in heaven. The lies I had to tell the poor child. You know, he doesn't think they're dead, he thinks they're working for Holy God and they're going to come back here again.
Trauma that has stayed on in some to this day.
Basically, the Stardust made me an orphan. That's how people know me. At least they're from the Stardust. No identity through this. I just want closure on this.
A tribunal of inquiry found that mismanagement by the owners, Eamon Butterley and his father, Patrick Butterley, had contributed significantly to the deaths and injuries.
There was 2 girls standing in the hallway and they said, doors are locked. And I said, just push the bar. And they said, it can't, there's a lock on it. And I picked the lock and the chain up in my hand and it was locked.
It found that other exits had a lock and chain draped over the push bars so as to suggest they were locked. One exit was obstructed by chairs, another by plastic skips. The toilet windows were also sealed shut.
There was people on the inside of the toilet windows banging on them, actually banging and screaming while burning, let us out.
You couldn't see the windows for fellas up trying to get them open.
But the tribunal's main findings were flawed. It concluded that the fire was probably started deliberately, in seating in the west alcove, and spread rapidly from there.
A finding of probable arson, but one based on speculation and hypothesis, not evidence. And pinning the blame on an unknown arsonist also meant families and survivors had no one to successfully sue.
While under the law at the time, the owners, as the victims of arson, were compensated.
Jimmy clung to life by a thread. 3 times he was given only 24 hours to live, but he fought against his injuries. In the intervening 4 years, he's constantly gone back and forth to hospital for operations and dressings.
My both arms, are kind of grafted. This grass is all off my legs. You know, this is all the skin off my legs.
Then, in 2006, on the 25th anniversary of the fire, Primetime spoke to witnesses and fire experts who challenged the tribunal's conclusion.
To accept the tribunal's conclusions that the fire was arson and that it was started in the West Alcove, there's a whole series of evidence that has to be cast aside, which the tribunal accepts as factual in their findings. The final proposition put forward, I'm convinced on all the evidence that that's wrong.
After submissions from the families, there was an official review, and 10 years ago, the tribunal's conclusion of arson was removed.
Fire experts working with the families were convinced that the fire was in fact raging in the roof space long before it was spotted on seats below. In particular, they focused on a storeroom containing highly flammable cleaning materials and supplies.
I'd be firmly of the opinion that the storeroom contents were significant and had a major impact on the development of the fire within the roof void of the Stardust building.
There was also evidence of 35 outside witnesses, suggesting the fire had breached the roof of the building before anyone spotted fire inside.
I looked out the window, I could see the roof glowing. I grew up onto the roof of our garage to get a better view. There, the flames were starting to come out through the roof at this stage.
The Stardust families fought on, and in 2017, another official assessment looked to see if there was indeed new evidence.
But it said theories did not amount to new evidence and that the true cause of the fire would probably never be established.
The families refused to give up. They demanded fresh inquests.
Well, it'll mean, right, that we know what happened and why. It'll mean a lot, right? Move on, get closure. As you don't get truth, you don't get justice, and you don't get closure.
In September, the Attorney General confirmed new inquests will take place. The AG said there had been an insufficiency of inquiry in the original inquests.
It's hard to disagree with that. 5 of the 48 bodies were unidentified for years, until in 2006, one of them, a young man, was identified just by a close read of the records.
Of the 5 unidentified, 27-year-old Murty Kavanagh was the only one who had a dental plate.
There was only 5 people that were unidentified, and one of them wore a denture plate, and that was my brother. And that was overlooked. I just think it's very shoddy. I felt really angry. We could have had some kind of closure that, you know, put flowers or some kind of marking that he had lived and he was part of this human race.
The Attorney General's announcement of new inquests brings fresh hope for the families of victims that finally, after almost 4 decades of trying, truth will be told.
Inquests by law are just about getting the medical cause of death. They're not about apportioning blame.
However, they are about finding out when, where, how, and in what circumstances those 48 young people died. And they are held in public.
So in many ways, they may represent the best hope so far that the truth will finally come out.